for economic justice in Sri Lanka. She is currently pursuing her PhD in education at the University of Massachusetts, USA. Prior to beginning of the doctoral program, Niyanthini worked as a visiting lecturer at the Open University of Sri Lanka and as an independent researcher in the northern and eastern regions, researching on post-war economic recovery, women's labor, and social protection policies. Niyanthini holds a master's degree in labor studies from McMaster University, Canada. Her master's research was on the effects of the Structural Adjustment Program on women's labor in Sri Lanka. She has a bachelor's degree in business management and worked as a strategy consultant for corporations and NGOs before moving into research and academia. Without any further ado, let me now invite Ms. Niyanthini Kadirgamar to address the gathering.
Dr. Sonali Teraniakala, Chairperson of the Human Rights Commission, members of the Commission, and to all of you gathered here. It's a pleasure to participate in this event, thinking about Women's Day, but also in relation to the humongous challenges women are faced currently in Sri Lanka. When the economic crisis hit in 2022, several women's organizations in Sri Lanka, across different parts of Sri Lanka, issued a statement. And in that statement, we recognized that the economic crisis is going to have a debilitating effect on women, and also that although economic policies are put forward as gender-neutral policies, the impact of those policies are also going to have gendered consequences on women. Among the many demands that we put forward, one of the main concerns for us at that time was food security, because we knew that women and children particularly were going to be affected by the lack of sufficient food and nutritious food. In 2024, we can already see the effects of the economic crisis as well as the economic recovery program, particularly on people's food insecurity, as both speakers have already elaborated quite a lot on. We are also beginning to see indicators of malnutrition, of food insecurity, of education being impacted, health indicators reversing, and all of which, Dr. Teraniakala has gone into detail. I guess the question for many of the women's organizations we have right now is to ask, how come we did not see this coming? Was it ignorance? Did we not know that this was how things were going to pan out? Or was this by design? And so I want to talk about women's position in Sri Lanka and globally. And I think in terms of the global economy, by design, women in the global south have been placed at the bottom of the global value chain. But like we have now experienced in Sri Lanka, we've seen that the global financial order and the way it works and the mechanisms that are in place in the global financial order have also been designed in a manner that can further women's inequality and further the exploitation that women face. So currently Sri Lanka is going through a sovereign debt crisis. We've defaulted on our loans. And it seems that in the last 2 years, the experiences that women are going through have shown that the repayment of debt and how Sri Lanka can get out of this crisis has also been designed around exploiting women, around extracting women's assets, extracting women's labor in a way that can then contribute towards repaying this debt. That seems to be the program, the economic recovery program in this country. So by design in the global financial order, we see the injustice of women having to again contribute towards repaying a debt that they did not contribute to. Women had no say in the kind of design and the economic policies that generated or created the economic crisis that we are seeing today. Secondly, Sri Lanka's economy itself, by design, has ensured that women, again, are placed at the bottom of the global value chain. And this experience goes back to more than 50 years now, since 1977, when Sri Lanka moved into an open economy model. Free trade zones were created where women worked in garment factories to generate foreign income through production. We have a longer history, almost 200 years, of garment factory, women working in tea plantations and have been generating foreign exchange through the production of tea and the exports of tea. And since the 80s, if we look at the migration patterns in Sri Lanka, of course the war infused a certain amount of migration, but beyond that, we also see that since the 1980s, we've seen a rise in women migrating from rural to urban, as well urban spaces, as well as going abroad in order to look for work. This again is by design, because what happened in that period, in the late 70s and early 80s, was that women farmers lost the land that they owned to foreign capital and large corporations that entered the rural economy. We saw that investments were cut into rural industries, including cottage industries where women worked and had jobs. And this created a surplus of labor. People were looking for employment. And the women who migrated from rural to urban areas ended up in garment factories and in factories in the free trade zones. And the rest went abroad as domestic labor. And so by design, we have an economy that relies on women's labor to earn foreign exchange in these three sectors. Therefore, I think the question of economic justice is also a question of what kind of economic model are we designing consciously, and where do we place women in that economic model. And these questions, I think, have become much more urgent now, because we are spending another Women's Day at a time when, as Dr. Sonali also elaborated, that the status of women has deteriorated so much in Sri Lanka. And the third point I want to highlight is that Sri Lanka also has a history of a different form of economic design, which did generate different outcomes for women. If we compare human development indicators with other countries that are comparable to Sri Lanka, in the early years after independence, in the early decades after independence, women's status improved. And that was in due to the free universal health system that we had and the free universal education system that we had. And economists have commented on this model and have highlighted that although we've had low economic growth in those decades, our human development indicators showed much better progress. So the unfortunate situation is that by design, we've dismantled a system that may have worked better for us, and we have reinstalled an economic model that has pushed women's status and their well-being into a much worse position. So how do we get out of this situation? Is there a way and an approach to think about economic justice at a time when we are facing multiple challenges? Within the human rights discourse, as well as the social justice discourse, one of the aspects that are highlighted in terms of economic justice is to introduce a program of redistribution. And unfortunately, what we are seeing right now in Sri Lanka is a redistribution of wealth from the bottom to the top again, right? Through forms of indebtedness, through forms of poor women and working women losing assets, through forms of wage repression, and through blatantly depriving people of even the kind of basic food that they are entitled to. But what we need is a redistribution from the top to the bottom, right? We need a distribution of wealth, we need a distribution of resources, and ensuring that it goes right down to the people who actually need them. One of the ways in which Sri Lanka achieved that in the past was through social protection programs, including health, education, subsidies for food security, and other basic needs like electricity, water, and so on. And there is a need that we start relooking at some of those aspects again. Very often when we talk about investing in education and health, the question of taxpayers' money comes up, right? But we also know the tax system in Sri Lanka is so skewed. And so for women who have been placed in this economic design where the whole system, including the global economic order, depends on women from the global south to exploit and generate incomes, we are asking the question about tax when even in Sri Lanka, the tax system relies on indirect taxation, right? Where even those in the poorest sections of society contribute to taxes. Therefore, there is a need to shift towards thinking about these provisions as rights and essential rights to ensure gender equality. The final point I want to touch on is that economic justice is not something that we think about as a standalone issue. As already I think also has been highlighted, that it relates to all kinds of other rights that we think about. It's very much connected to civil and political rights. It's very much connected to the democratic society that we want to build in. A program of redistribution obviously needs the participation of people. We cannot build an economic model without the participation of people. And very often, a program of distribution has also, historically if you look at it, has involved a push from the bottom, resistance from the bottom, resistance from people in order to push those who are in a position to make those changes, to effect those changes. And unfortunately, again, what we are seeing right now is a repression of people's voices, the stifling of opportunities for people to come together and organize together, a stifling of people from being able to express their views. And all of this because of the economic injustice that has been perpetuated from the economic crisis and its recovery program. Therefore, I think economic justice is not just about ensuring equality. It also impacts our democratic rights, the democratic society that we aspire to. Finally, in an economic crisis and in a recovery program, the state has a much larger role because what happens in a crisis is the market fails. The market just doesn't function. And if the state does not have the fiscal space to ensure economic justice, to ensure that it can intervene in ways to take off some of the burden that otherwise women will have to bear, and we've seen this also happen, when the market failed, the entire risk of the economic crisis was pushed towards the households. Within the households, women again had to bear the brunt of somehow trying to put food on the table when every other system had just collapsed. And therefore, the question of fiscal space becomes extremely important. Do we in Sri Lanka right now have that space for the state to intervene in ways that can better people's lives. And I think that is a serious question, because again, when a government or the state does not have fiscal space to enact these policies, what we've seen in other countries is also that we fall into more authoritarian and anti-democratic means to control populations. I think my time is up, so I will end here. Once again, I want to thank the Human Rights Commission for giving me this opportunity to participate in this program. Thank you.